Please welcome Jeremey Donovan.
Well, from Toastmasters that aren't too familiar with the contest, the first question I always get is, so, Jeremy, did you win the Toastmasters World Championship for public speaking? Now, since you're all Toastmasters and many of you are advanced Toastmasters, have I ever won?
No.
No, I have not won. So what business do I have writing this book? And in fact, that's the email I got from Darren LaCroix right after I published it. And Darren was giving me a little bit of a gentle ribbing because I had interviewed Darren actually, and Ed Tate, and Craig Valentine, and David Henderson, and Ryan Avery, and David Brooks, and on and on and on. I interviewed about 12 of the former world champions to understand how is it that you go about winning the world championship. I had a selfless reason for doing this, which is that I wanted to unleash these secrets that are trapped in the minds of these brilliant speakers that many contestants who are competing today research and figure out but don't want to share for fear they're going to give something away that they're going to lose the edge. I also had a very selfish motivation for doing it, which is that I joined Toastmasters 15 years ago when I was an engineer and I was extremely introverted. I had social anxiety. When people would knock on my door at my apartment, I would huddle in the corner in terror because I was afraid to answer the door. And Toastmasters brought me out of my shell. However, through all those 15 years, I never competed in the International Speech Contest. And I figured if I'm ever going to do it, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it right. I'm going to go talk to all these world champions. I'm going to figure out what the secrets are. And then I'm going to do the best I possibly can in the contest. And I entered this year. It was a blast. It was a terror at times as well. How many of you, I always turn this way, so raise your hand if you've competed in the contest before. So it's about half the room. It was quite a terror. The club speech I got through relatively easily. There usually are only a few contestants there, and I've had a lot more speaking experience. The area also was a relatively easy one. Then I actually lost at division. And fortunately for me, unluckily for the guy who won division, he had already scheduled a trip to France with his family. And it was France or district contest. France or district contest. There are some Toastmasters who would pick district contest, but he, I think wisely for his family, chose France. So I went on to do the district contest and rewrote my speech dramatically. When I was sitting in that room, I couldn't eat my dinner. I don't know what happened. I was so terrified again. I felt like it was 15 years ago when I was an engineer and I didn't know how to speak. And I'm sitting there, and the guy sitting next to me was from my club, and he could tell that something was wrong. I was curled up into a ball, couldn't eat my food. And he, thank God, Simon Silverleaf, if you guys have met him, Simon just talked to me about absolutely nothingness. I couldn't tell you what he talked about, but his point was just to get me to relax, not about the contest, whatever. And then I got up there and it came out. And I think that's one of the big lessons of the contest is you may be a little bit afraid to go and do it, and it's a lot harder than it is to do something like this. It's so much harder to do 5 to 7 minutes than it is to do 40 minutes, where you're interactive and you're facilitative. I find it a really difficult thing to do. It's so much harder than all the DTM track, with the CC and all the advanced speaking tracks. I just found it to be that much harder because of the competitive aspect of it. I had a blast, came in second place in district, which I was absolutely thrilled about because my heart could not take another contest. And I may do it again next year, but really that was it. And I did the best that I could based on the things that I had learned. I'm not a perfect international speech speaker. I don't know, I'm not going to say I'm not going to win because I want to believe in myself, but I don't know if I ever necessarily will. And one of the big reasons, and I'll explain why some of those reasons are, some of the impediments that I have, because I've optimized my speaking for a particular purpose. My day job is that I work as head of marketing for a large information technology company. And what I usually do is I'll go into a board meeting or I'll go into an executive meeting, and I've optimized myself to be successful in that environment. Who saw Ryan Avery's speech? 2012 world champion. All right. At one point, Ryan Avery does what? he crawls on the floor in a drunken stupor. If I did that in a board meeting, how long am I going to be at the company? So it's a really, I have to lumber down there. It's a really unnatural thing for me to do. But let's deconstruct a few elements of the contest. So for those of you who have competed before, what are some of the titles that you have had? If you remember your last speech, what was the title of your last speech? Yeah?
The epidemic of failure.
The epidemic of failure. So if when you hear the epidemic of failure, what do you start to think about? You start to think about failure. Where does your mind go? Like right in that split second, you're in the therapist's office and someone just said, the epidemic of failure, go! Sickness? Because you got epidemic in there, you got sickness, so your mind is kind of going there. Who thinks about failures in their own lives? Right? You start to think about failures in your own lives, everyone's had them. So the first lesson of the contest is actually, before you actually get on stage, the title you choose has a tremendous impact on whether you win or lose. Especially when you get to the International Speech Contest, where you've got 9 of the best speakers in the world. And often it's the tiniest thing that distinguishes between different speakers. What I have, if you go through methodically all the different types of titles that exist, the titles that tend to win most often are titles that are maxims. It doesn't have to be a maxim, there's lots of other kinds that have won historically. If you take the 2012 champion, Ryan Avery, anyone know what his title was? 3 words. I'll give you the first 2, and you guess the third, all right? Or actually, it's 4 words. Trust is a
Must.
right? Trust is a must. Now, when you hear trust is a must, what do you think? It rhymes, so that's just great. But it also, one of the things about maxims that is different than the epidemic of failure. The epidemic of failure is a noun, all right? If you think about it, it's an epidemic, and the of failure is a descriptive clause that tacks onto it, but ultimately it's a noun, it's an epidemic. With a maxim, trust is a must, you have a complete maxim there. Trust is something, and it actually is telling your brain something that you can walk out of the speech and have the core message. The core theme is about trust, and that trust is important. And your mind, as an audience member, once you hear Ryan Avery, trust is a must, Ryan Avery, your brain wants to know, okay, there must have been some time where he wasn't trustworthy or someone didn't trust him or whatever it happens to be. So that trigger in people's minds is very important. So put a lot of effort into your titles, keep them short. I love your short title. If you can, design them into a maxim that is the core takeaway from your talk without giving too much away. And in Ryan's speech, he then proceeds to talk about a time when he was not trustworthy. That's part 1 of his speech. Part 2 of his speech is a time when he trusted somebody else, but that individual should not have been trusted. And then part 3 of his speech is a third story where somebody trusts him, and because that trust that they put in him, this person becomes his wife. All right, so it's a very touching, lovely story, and he progressively works through these trust at higher and higher stakes as he goes through each element of his speech, and then in the end, you get the marriage. So that first piece is make sure you have a title that meaningfully triggers something in people's minds. Speaker number 1 in the 2012 contest was a guy named Andrew Kneebone. Anybody else go to the contest, the 2012 contest? Who's been to an international contest before? All right, I had never been before 2012, despite my 15 years in Toastmasters, and I found it to be a really fantastic experience. One is that you get to watch all these incredible semifinal speeches, and you learn techniques that you wouldn't have known. Another is there are amazing educational sessions. Our district educational sessions, I'm in District 53 also, I think are great. I've learned a lot in them. The ones you see in the international contest and the international conference are as good, if not better, than some of the ones that we see here. So they're extremely valuable. For example, Jock Elliott was there, who was the 2011 champion, and Jock deconstructed his speech, which I thought was really fun to see. there was a Stanford University professor, Matt Abrams, who talked about managing your fear and your anxiety. I strongly encourage you to go. I don't know if Cincinnati's the best city, and Kuala Lumpur is a little pricey for the following year, but if you can do it, more power to you. All right, so we started out with having the title be important. Let's say you've got this great title. Now, shockingly, one of the things that can determine whether you win or lose is how you take the stage. And this is one of the things that I learned. It actually relates to interviewing. Someone told me 15, 20 years ago that when you go in for an interview, be careful, because it's not just the time that you're sitting down and speaking formally to the interviewer. When they get you with the trickiest, sneakiest questions is often when you're walking away from the interview or when you're walking into the interview. You've let your guard down and you think everything is okay. Well, how you enter the Toastmasters conference stage also matters tremendously. And if you watch, there are a lot of speakers who walk out and they're kind of looking down. And you can see the face is very neutral because they're concentrating on their speech. And all of a sudden they perk up and they smile, and then it's like boom. So you've got this very different persona of the person who walked into the room and then the one who took the stage. Be very, very thoughtful about how you take the stage.